Most families in the 50s got by just fine on one income and one car. Dad worked, Mom ran the house, and somehow it all balanced. These days, 2 incomes and 2 cars still leave folks stretched thin. Feels like progress sped up the treadmill. More gadgets, more bills, and not a whole lot more peace of mind. Gasoline in the 1950s cost 29 cents a gallon, about $3.48 in today's money. These days, the average is closer to $3.15. So technically, it's cheaper now. But don't expect a smile, a window wash, and someone checking your oil. You'll pump it yourself, tap your card, and wonder where all the manners went. In the 1950s, the average home cost around $7,354, or about $90,000 today. That bought you a yard, a garage, and maybe even a white picket fence. Today, the average home costs north of $420,000, and the backyard's optional. It's still called the American Dream, but it takes a whole lot more dreaming and a much bigger mortgage. In the 1950s, you left the house after breakfast and came home when the streetlights flickered on. No texts, no tracking. You just knew to be back for dinner. Now, kids have GPS tags, digital fences, and parents checking apps. It's safer, sure. But back then, freedom was measured in scraped knees. News came from the paper on your porch, the 6 o'clock report, or folks chatting on front steps. You trusted Walter Cronkite more than half your relatives. Now, headlines buzz your phone before your eyes are even open. It's instant, constant, and often exhausting. Back then, news came slow, but it felt like it mattered more when it did. The average family in the 50s brought in about $3,300 a year, about $38,000 today. And yet, they managed. Bills were smaller, expectations lower, and nobody needed 5 subscriptions just to watch TV. Now, the median income's over $74,000, but most folks still feel like they're playing catch-up. Somehow, more doesn't always feel like better. Dinner back then meant meatloaf, pot roast, or tuna casserole, and you ate what was served. You passed the rolls, said Grace, and maybe fought over the last pork chop. Now, it's DoorDash, food allergies, and separate screens. The meat's plant-based, the drink's sugar-free, and the table's usually empty. It's still dinner, sure, just not the same kind of together. Life in the 1950s moved slower. Days were quieter, expectations simpler, and the world felt smaller. Now, everything's faster, louder, and always on. You're more connected, but harder to reach. Simpler times weren't perfect, but when the sun set, you knew where you stood. We drank from the garden hose and nobody blinked. It was lukewarm, slightly metallic, and tasted like pure summer. Now kids sip from $40 bottles with timestamps and built-in filters. Better for them, maybe. But somehow, that old hose water still hits the memory just right, especially after a game of kickball and chasing the ice cream truck. In the 50s, you walked to school with your buddies, books in hand, and no helmets in sight. You talked, you joked, you probably got into a little trouble on the way. Now it's SUVs, car lines, and honking parents. The commute's safer, sure, but there was something magical about arriving on your own 2 feet. In the 1950s, Baby news came in the mail, a card with blue booties or pink ribbon, maybe a tiny photo tucked inside. It felt personal, and you kept it on the counter for weeks. Now it's a video with fireworks and theme music, bigger, louder, faster. But somehow, not quite as sweet as a quiet envelope and good news inside. Lunch in the 50s? A Bologna sandwich in wax paper, maybe an apple, and a thermos of warm milk. You traded cookies, complained about crusts, and never saw a quinoa bowl. Today's kids get compartment trays and fruit carved into zoo animals. Healthier, maybe. Fancier, definitely. But a soggy PB&J still has its place in my heart. Teachers in the 50s wore ties and had paddles. You stood when they walked in. If you acted up, they called your folks, and that was worse than detention. These days, classrooms have cameras, therapy dogs, and emails home. I'm glad kids are safer. But boy, when Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow, that was your therapy. A TV set in the 50s ran you $250, about $3,000 today. And for that, you got 3 channels, rabbit ears, and no remote. Now, $250 gets you a flat screen with 1,000 shows. And somehow, nothing you want to watch. Funny how choice used to mean what's on, and now it just means scrolling forever. Teenagers used to pass folded notes in class, carefully written, sneakily delivered, and sometimes perfumed. A well-placed, "Do you like me?" check yes or no could change a week. Now it's texting under the desk, selfies and emojis doing the flirting. Quicker, sure. But a scribbled heart on lined paper still hits harder. In the 50s, screen time meant the drive-in. You'd pull up, crack a window, and listen through a tinny speaker while sipping a root beer float. Today, it's tablets, phones, laptops, all glowing at once. We still gather around screens. There's just more of them, and fewer fireflies outside. Flying used to be an event. You dressed in coats, ties, polished shoes, like it meant something. Even movie nights called for slacks and lipstick. Now it's sweatpants, earbuds, and boarding groups. Comfort wins, sure. But there was a time when looking your best wasn't about where you were going. It was just the way you showed up. Calendars used to hang in the kitchen with tractors, puppies, or maybe Betty Grable. You'd circle birthdays in pen and tear off the page each month. Now your phone buzzes with reminders you forgot to set, and every app wants to be your assistant. It works, sure, but we never missed a dentist appointment with a tractor on the wall. In the 50s, the milkman came early like clockwork. Bottles clinked on the porch and the cream rose to the top. He smiled, knew your name, and maybe handed you a lollipop. Now it's strangers dropping groceries from an app. Faster? Sure. But you can't really chat with a hatchback and a barcode. A movie ticket in 1955 cost 50 cents. That's about $6 today. Now it's closer to 16, and that's before the popcorn. Back then, a night at the movies was affordable, exciting, and came with a cartoon first. Now, it's a luxury. In the 1950s, working from home meant you were sick or out of work. Now it's a lifestyle with video calls, pajama pants, and coffee breaks 3 steps from the couch. I'm glad folks have the option, but I do miss when going to work meant dressing up and seeing someone besides your dog all day. Pen pals were a real thing. You'd wait weeks for a reply, then rip open the envelope like it was Christmas morning. Neat handwriting, a pressed flower maybe, even a foreign stamp. Today, it's text messages and chat bubbles. Fast, convenient, but gone in a blink. There was something special about stories told one letter at a time. Everyone smoked in the 50s, on airplanes, in offices, even in hospitals. Ashtrays were everywhere, and cigarette machines stood by the door. Now it's vapes and backpacks and smoke-free everything. Healthier, no doubt. But I'll admit, there was something cinematic about a guy in a fedora lighting up with one hand and tipping his hat with the other. Back then, the radio was your soundtrack. Big band, baseball games, and late-night storytelling. You tuned in with a twist of the dial and a bit of luck. Now it's Spotify and podcasts, playlists built by algorithms. There's more variety now, sure, but no AI will ever match the thrill of finding your favorite song by accident. The 50s gave you Leave It to Beaver. Wholesome, predictable, and everyone said please. Today, it's Euphoria. Flashy, fast, and full of things that need explaining. Stories changed, screens got sharper, and plots got louder. But there was something about black and white TV and popcorn in a metal bowl that didn't need a warning label. Nobody wore seatbelts in the 50s. Kids rode up front, sometimes on your lap, and the only thing holding you back was Dad's arm. Now your car beeps, flashes, and practically lectures you until everyone's buckled up. It's safer, no doubt, but back then, a Sunday drive felt freer, wind in your hair, and no alarms chirping at you. A family road trip meant unfolding a paper map across the dashboard, singing along to the AM radio, and counting cows out the window. Motels had neon signs and coin-operated magic fingers on the bed. Now it's GPS, backseat tablets, and arguing over Bluetooth. You'll still get there, but you won't see nearly as much on the way. Sharing a photo used to mean winding the film, taking the shot, waiting a week for it to develop, and tucking it into an envelope. Maybe Grandma got one by Christmas. Now it's filters, hashtags, and 100 likes in 5 minutes. Convenient, sure, but that old black and white Polaroid stuck to the fridge. That one stayed around for decades. Saturday morning was sacred. You poured a bowl of sugary cereal, parked yourself on the carpet, and didn't move until the cartoons ended. No pause button, no continue watching. You missed it, you missed it. Now kids have on-demand everything. But somehow, it's not quite as exciting as hearing that theme song play right on time. We played stickball in the street, dodging traffic and shouting, "Car!" when someone had to move the bases. Summer lasted forever, and dirt stains were a badge of honor. These days, kids play online in dark rooms with headsets and avatars. The worlds are bigger, sure, but they're missing the magic of a cracked bat and real bruises. If you loved a song, you waited by the radio for it to play again, or saved up to buy the record. There was patience in the process. Now, you just shout, "Hey, Siri, play that one again," and boom, it's back. The access is amazing, but I'll always remember the thrill of hearing your favorite tune by surprise. A family vacation meant a packed station wagon, a cooler full of sandwiches, and roadside attractions you actually stopped for. You made it to the Grand Canyon with half a map and no reservations. Now, it's flights to Cancun, Google itineraries, and Wi-Fi by the pool. Still nice, but sometimes getting lost made the best stories. Back then, if your car broke down, you popped the hood, cursed a little, and fixed it yourself, or at least tried. Everyone had a wrench and a can of WD-40. Now, one warning light, and you need a specialist, a reset code, and maybe a second mortgage. Cars got smarter and a whole lot less friendly. In the 50s, adults were respected without needing to earn it. If an older man said something, you nodded. Now, kids fact-check you on Google mid-sentence. They're sharp, no doubt. But sometimes, I miss the days when "because I said so" was a full stop, not the beginning of a debate. Shop class was a staple, wood, metal, maybe even a little engine repair. You built birdhouses, learned the difference between a wrench and a socket, and left with splinters and pride. These days, it's coding boot camps and SAT prep. Useful? Sure, but nobody ever fondly remembers debugging a spreadsheet. Coffee in the 50s was a dime at the diner poured from a pot that never ran dry. Cream and sugar? Sure, but no one asked what kind of milk you preferred. Now, it's $5 lattes with foam art and names longer than the order. I'll take my coffee hot, black, and served with a wink from a waitress. A handshake used to mean something. Trust, respect, a deal sealed without fine print. You looked a man in the eye and stuck to your word. Now it's digital signatures, dotted lines, and follow-up emails with "as per my last message." It's still business, but it sure lost some of the honor. At the grocery store, folks wrote checks and made conversation. The line moved slower, but nobody minded. Now it's beep, tap, go. And heaven forbid someone needs cash back. Convenience wins, I guess. But I miss the days when your checker knew your name and asked about your garden. If your bike got stolen, you walked the neighborhood, asked around, maybe offered $1 reward. Now it's doorbell cameras, online posts, and frame-by-frame breakdowns. Sure, we catch more thieves, but back then, solving the mystery was half the adventure. And sometimes your bike just came back on its own. Back then, you collected bottle caps, marbles, and bugs in jars with holes poked in the lid. Every item had a story, a trade, a place in a shoebox under the bed. Now it's digital skins, NFTs, and collectibles you can't hold. It's still called collecting, but it's missing the dirt, the thrill, and the trade at recess. Getting your picture taken in the 50s was an event. Hair combed, collars straight, film loaded just right. You smiled for real because you only got one shot. Now folks take 37 selfies before breakfast and delete 36. The moments are more frequent now, but somehow they don't feel as kept. Kids used to say ma'am and sir without being told. You held the door, tipped your hat, and said, "Excuse me," like it was second nature. Now you get bruh and nah, maybe even a shrug. They're not bad kids, just raised in a world that forgot the magic of manners. Records were played with care, needle down, static hum, and that warm sound filling the room. Then came tapes, CDs, and digital files. Now vinyl's back, rebranded as vintage by the younger crowd. But it isn't nostalgia. It's just music, the way it was meant to sound. No skip button. Lawns were mowed with push mowers powered by sweat and determination. You smelled fresh grass, worked up a good lather, and earned your lemonade. Now, there are robots doing it while you're inside watching TV. Efficient, sure. But the sound of a mower and a Saturday morning sun still beats automation. If you got lost, you pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked someone. Maybe they drew you a little map on a napkin. Now, your phone reroutes you before you know you're off course. It's faster, yes, but sometimes a stranger's directions came with a smile, a shortcut, and a story. Phone numbers lived in your head or in a little book next to the phone. You knew your best friends, your doctors, and probably the pizza place. Now, they're floating in the cloud, and if your phone dies, you're out of luck. It's smart technology, until it isn't. Sugar used to be just sugar. You scooped it into your coffee, baked with it, and called it a treat. Now there's cane, beet, stevia, agave, and opinions on everyone. Folks argue over labels more than taste. Back then, a cookie was a cookie. Today, it needs a food label and a debate. When the TV acted up, you gave it a good smack on the side. 9 times out of 10, it worked. Now, one hiccup and you're unplugging modems, restarting apps, and calling tech support in another time zone. Progress is great, but sometimes I still trust a firm whack more than a software update. You ate dirt, drank from the hose, and came home with gravel in our knees. Playground slides were metal, hot enough to fry an egg, and nobody had hand sanitizer. You just rubbed some spit on it and kept going. Now it's antibacterial wipes, foam flooring, and adult supervision. Safer, sure, but not nearly as fun. In the 50s, a stream was a muddy little adventure where you caught frogs, skipped rocks, and maybe got leeches. Now streaming means buffering in the middle of your favorite show. It's all digital and high def. But somehow, that little gurgling creek felt more alive than any Netflix screen ever will. Teenagers learned to drive stick on real roads, not simulators, grinding gears, stalling at stop signs, and learning when to pop the clutch was a rite of passage. Now most can't parallel park without a beeping sensor. The cars are smarter, yes, but the drivers? Let's just say they'd struggle with Dad's old pickup. Back then, all a parent had to say was, "Be home by dark." And you were. No GPS, no check-ins, just trust. Now it's text me every hour, share your location, and a dozen apps watching your every move. Peace of mind? Maybe. But there was something powerful about being trusted to roam. The encyclopedia set lived on a shelf in the den, heavy, gold-trimmed, and slightly dusty. If you needed an answer, that's where you went. Now it's Google, voice assistants, and more opinions than facts. It's faster, sure, but flipping pages by flashlight for a book report on Saturn? That's how you learned and impressed the teacher. Typing class meant clackety keys, sore fingers, and that terrifying ding when you hit the end of the line. You sat up straight and learned to type without looking. Now it's auto-correct doing most of the work, and sometimes undoing it. Back then, typos meant erasers. Now they mean awkward group texts and strange birthday captions. Doctors made house calls in the 50s. Black bag in hand, they'd sit on your bed, check your pulse, and ask about the family. You felt cared for. Now, you wait 3 weeks for a video call if you're lucky, and the Wi-Fi cuts out halfway through. Progress? Maybe. But that knock at the door meant something. A playlist was a stack of 45s next to the record player. You flipped them over, chose carefully, and maybe even danced a little. Now an algorithm picks what you might like. It's convenient, but those old stacks had soul. You didn't just play songs. You remembered where you bought them, who you were with, and what they meant. In the 50s, your neighbor might show up with a pie just because. You didn't call, you just knocked. Now, the only surprise visits are noise complaints. Garages stay closed, and folks wave through apps instead of windows. I miss knowing who lived next door, especially when their cherry pie won first place at the fair. Talking meant face to face. You read eyes, watched hands, and listened between the words. Now it's blue bubbles, scene indicators, and red receipts that somehow hurt your feelings. We communicate more, but connect less. A good porch chat over coffee still beats any emoji. You memorized phone numbers like birthdays. You knew your best friends, your schools, and your grandmas off by heart. Now kids can't even dial their own without checking contacts. Lose your phone, and you lose half your life. Back then it was all upstairs, and no battery required. Toys were made of metal, wood, and real danger. Sharp edges, small parts, and not a warning label in sight. But they lasted. Now it's plastic, batteries, and Wi-Fi apps that stop working in 6 months. I still have a cast iron fire truck that could survive a tornado. And did. A ball game played through a scratchy AM radio was enough to bring the whole porch to a hush. You could picture the crowd, the swing, the call. Now it's 4K, 10 angles, and live stats on screen. Still fun, but back then, it was your imagination that made it real. Kids rode bikes with no helmets, no reflectors, and no GPS. You might crash into a bush, brush off the dirt, and ride another mile. These days, it's full gear and warning signs. I'm glad they're safer, but part of growing up was learning how to fall and get back up. Meals in the 50s didn't come with labels. You didn't know the calories. You just knew Mom made it from scratch. Now it's nutritional info, sodium counts, allergy warnings. Probably healthier, but that tuna casserole with crushed crackers on top? No label needed. Just love and maybe a little too much salt. In the 50s, woke meant being up, dressed, and halfway through a plate of bacon. Now it means something else entirely, and tends to start more arguments than it ends. Language changes, meanings shift, and words get louder. But there was a time when being woke just meant your feet hit the floor. The bread shelf in the 50s had white bread, maybe rye if the store was fancy. Now, it's a whole aisle of grains, seeds, and scientific experiments. Gluten-free, low-carb, high-fiber. Back then, 2 slices of Wonder and some peanut butter covered just about everything. And nobody needed a food label to enjoy it. Sunday mornings meant church, pressed shirts, warm hymns, and potlucks after the sermon. Everyone went, or at least acted like they did. Now it's live streamed if it happens at all. Faith is still there, but the pews are quieter. There's still something about shaking hands with the same folks every week, especially when one of them brings banana bread. You left your doors unlocked, not because you were careless, but because you trusted your neighbors. Now, it's motion sensors, security apps, and doorbell cameras with night vision. It's good to be cautious. Don't you miss the sound of a screen door creaking open and a neighbor hollering, "Y'all got any sugar?" In the 50s, misbehaving meant a trip to the principal, or worse, your parents' glare. One call home and you shaped up quick. Now it's meetings with counselors, behavior charts, and a team of specialists. Maybe we understand more now, but back then, a stern look said plenty. The car radio had 2 knobs, one for volume, one for tuning. You twisted and hoped for a clear station. Now it's voice commands, touch-screen menus, and 15 options before the engine even starts. Fancy, yes, but somehow harder to use. You never had to update the dial on my '54 Ford. Job interviews meant a firm handshake, your best suit, and looking someone in the eye. You spoke your truth and hoped it was enough. Now, you send resumes into a digital void and cross your fingers a bot picks you. I miss the days when people hired people, not software filters. If you wanted a toy, you saved up allowance, went to the store, and stared through the glass like it was Christmas morning. Now it's buy now, and it shows up tomorrow. The toy might be fancier, but the waiting, the earning, the excitement, that was half the magic. People ironed everything, shirts, handkerchiefs, even sheets. The smell of steam and starch was part of getting ready. Now it's wrinkle release spray, a quick tumble in the dryer, and hoping nobody notices. If the power went out in the 50s, you lit a candle, played cards, and maybe told a ghost story. Now the Wi-Fi drops and the whole house goes into crisis mode. No streaming? No signal? Back then, quiet was normal. Now it's called an outage. Politicians used to argue in suits, shaking hands after the debate. You didn't always agree, but at least they looked like they respected the office. Now they argue on Twitter, type in all caps, and block each other like high schoolers. I liked it better when grown-ups acted like it. In the 1950s, trolls lived in fairy tales and under bridges. Now they live in comment sections, faceless, nameless, and always ready to stir the pot. You used to walk away from a grump. Now you scroll past paragraphs of rage under a photo of someone's lunch. Not exactly progress, but definitely louder. Gas stations once checked your oil, filled your tires, and cleaned your windshield with a smile. You never had to leave the car. Now, you're lucky if the pump works on the first try. The snacks are better. Sushi, lottery tickets, maybe a phone charger, but nobody calls you sir while topping off the tank. A night out meant the soda fountain, maybe a slice of pie, and a song on the jukebox. You might split a milkshake with someone special, and pretend not to care who was watching. Now it's food courts, playlists, and swiping on phones between bites. The music's still playing, but it used to feel more like a moment. Your phone in the 50s had a rotary dial, a shared line, and a spot on the kitchen wall. If it rang, everyone heard it, and sometimes your neighbor did too. These days, it's a pocket computer that never sleeps. We've traded privacy for convenience. And somehow, with all that tech, it still drops calls when you need it most. Cursive wasn't just taught, it was expected. Every school desk had a name carved in script, and signatures looked like art. Now, it's barely taught and barely legible. Most documents are typed, signed with a finger, or just clicked. You might never need cursive again. But that capital Q still looks like a fancy number 2. Family portraits happened once a year, matching outfits, a real camera, and the one uncle who couldn't keep his eyes open. You framed it and put it on the mantel. Now it's selfies before breakfast, filters by lunch, and 100 digital photos that never make it off the phone. More pictures, maybe, but fewer memories on the wall. In the 1950s, going viral meant a bad cold was spreading through the school and half the class was out. Now it means a video gets millions of views in a day and maybe a sponsorship deal. The words changed, but the speed stayed the same. Just a different kind of contagious. By high school, most kids could change a tire, gap a spark plug, and explain what a carburetor did. Now, roadside assistance gets called before the trunk is even opened. The cars got more advanced, and the skills slowly disappeared. Knowing how to lift a jack used to be common sense. Now it's a YouTube tutorial. Playgrounds had towering metal slides, spinning death traps, and concrete under your feet. You left with blisters, splinters, and bragging rights. Now it's foam rubber, rounded edges, and safety regulations longer than the monkey bars. It's safer, no doubt. But you're not supposed to feel safe on a seesaw. Car keys were tiny, flat, and all looked the same. You kept a spare under the mat or taped inside the bumper. Now they've got chips, batteries, and price tags that make you wince. A lost key used to mean a quick stop at the hardware store. Now it's a dealership visit and a small loan. If the doorbell rang in the 50s, you answered it. No hesitation. Might have been a neighbor, a salesman, or someone dropping off a pie. Now, you freeze, check the doorbell cam, and hope they go away. Technology adds security. But it also adds suspicion. Privacy once meant closing the door and pulling the curtains. That was enough. Now it means toggling app settings, reading 37 pages of terms, and trying to guess who's watching. Nothing's truly private when every device listens. You used to whisper secrets. Now you just hope the smart speaker wasn't paying attention. Your news feed used to be the barbershop. You heard what was going on, swapped a few jokes, and walked out with a fresh cut and a better mood. Now it's digital, endless, and designed to rile you up. Same stories, more opinions, less trust, and no haircut to make you feel better. Directions were shared by handing someone a paper map and tracing the route with a pen. You remembered landmarks, made notes, and asked strangers if needed. Now it's a live location in a group chat, updated by satellite. Easier, yes, but harder to feel like you know the way. Every block had a shoe repair shop. Scuffed soles, busted heels, even laces got replaced. You fixed what you owned. Now when the sneakers fall apart, you just click buy again. It's fast, convenient, and entirely disposable. But those shoes with 3 patches? They had stories. Politeness wasn't extra, it was expected. You held doors, said thank you, and stood when someone older walked in. Now, kindness catches people off guard. A simple please feels like a rare compliment. The manners aren't gone, just quiet. But you still notice when someone uses them. A long-distance call was an event. You scheduled it, paid by the minute, and kept it short. Voices echoed, and every second mattered. Now, you FaceTime across the planet for free while scrambling eggs. It's easier than ever to connect, but harder to remember when it felt special. Coffee came in percolators. It took time, made noise, and filled the kitchen with that unmistakable smell. Everyone drank the same cup. No choices, no customizations. Now it's pods, blends, froth, and preferences. You get exactly what you want. But it used to be simpler. Hot, strong, and ready when the toast popped up. A sick day meant staying home with soup, a blanket, and reruns on the black and white. Nobody expected much, just rest. Now it means answering emails, joining meetings from bed, and pretending the cough button on Zoom works. You still stay home. You just don't stop working. If someone was running late, you waited. You trusted they'd show up. Maybe called their house if it went too long. Now, you track their phone, watch the little dot move, and wonder why it paused 2 blocks away. It's helpful, yes, but it took the patience out of punctuality. A handshake was your introduction. Firm grip, steady eye contact, and a name that stuck. Now it's a QR code, a LinkedIn link, and maybe a 3-paragraph bio. You still make connections, but that first impression used to be all it took. People saved stamps, matchbooks, and coins. You kept them in tins, drawers, and jars, and each one had a story. Now it's screenshots, memes, and cloud storage. The memories are still there, somewhere, but you can't flip through them during a thunderstorm with a flashlight. Every kid wanted a BB gun, a chemistry set, or a slingshot made from a tree branch. You built, broke, and sometimes got burned. Now it's consoles, touchscreens, and high-speed internet. The toys got safer and more expensive. But there was a time when danger came in a cardboard box marked science. Going to the store meant tying your shoes, grabbing a list and walking there, maybe bumping into someone you knew. Now it's scrolling, clicking, and hoping the delivery guy reads the instructions. You still get the groceries. But the trip used to be part of the day, not something you skipped. Meals were eaten together, one table, one conversation, one pot roast, feeding everyone. If the phone rang, nobody answered. Now, dinner can mean 4 screens in 4 rooms, and texts instead of talk. The food may be better, but the company was the best part. Diaries had little locks, and secrets were written in pencil under your pillow. Thoughts were private, safe, and shared only if you chose. Now, Feelings go out online for the world to see, liked, shared, and commented on. You still write your story. It just has a lot more readers.